The distant rumble of thunder echoed across the barren landscape as Cassandra Reynolds clutched her satchel tighter, the last of her strength ebbing away with each labored step. She had never imagined that her journey west would end like this, alone, feverish, and stumbling into what appeared to be nothing more than a ghost of a town, its weathered buildings standing like tombstones against the darkening Arizona sky of 1876. Cassandra's vision blurred as she dragged herself down the town's only street, the dust swirling around her boots. She had left Boston 3 weeks prior with dreams of establishing herself as a schoolteacher in the promising town of Silvercrest. But the stagecoach driver had unceremoniously informed her upon arrival at the last outpost that Silvercrest was another 2 days' ride, and no coach would be heading that way for at least a week. Unwilling to delay her arrival for her new position, she had made the foolish decision to hire a horse and ride there herself. Now, as fever gripped her body and her rented mare had run off during last night's thunderstorm, Cassandra found herself at the mercy of this forgotten place. The faded sign swinging above her head read Redemption, though the town appeared anything but redemptive as she surveyed the boarded-up storefronts and silent saloon. "Hello?" she called out, her voice barely above a whisper. "Is anyone here? Please." Her legs finally gave way beneath her, and she collapsed onto the dusty street, her consciousness fading as rapidly as the daylight. The last thing she remembered was the sound of boot steps approaching and strong arms lifting her from the ground. When Cassandra opened her eyes again, she found herself lying on a surprisingly comfortable bed, a cool cloth pressed against her forehead. The room was dim, lit only by a single oil lamp on a nearby table, casting long shadows across the wooden walls. "You're awake," came a deep voice from the corner of the room. "Starting to think you might not come around." She turned her head slowly, wincing at the pain that shot through her temples. A man sat in a wooden chair, his features partially obscured by shadow. As he leaned forward into the lamplight, she saw a face weathered by the elements yet handsome in its rugged way. Dark hair fell in waves to his shoulders, and a neatly trimmed beard framed a strong jaw. His eyes, a startling shade of green, studied her with concern. "Where am I?" Cassandra managed to ask, her throat painfully dry. The man stood and crossed to a small table, pouring water from a pitcher into a tin cup. "You're in Redemption, or what's left of it," he answered, approaching the bed and carefully helping her to sit up enough to drink. "Name's Gabriel Reid. Most folks just call me Gabe." Cassandra drank greedily, the cool water bringing immediate relief. "Thank you," she said, her voice still weak. "I'm Cassandra Reynolds. I was on my way to Silvercrest when I fell ill." Gabriel nodded, taking the empty cup. "Silvercrest's nearly 30 miles from here. You're lucky you found Redemption when you did. Your fever was dangerous high when I found you collapsed in the street." "How long have I been here?" she asked, noting the unfamiliar nightgown she now wore. 3 days, Gabriel replied, a hint of concern creasing his brow. "The widow Johnson, she lives at the edge of town. She helped get you changed and comfortable. She's been checking on you daily." Cassandra tried to sit up further but found the room spinning around her. Gabriel was quickly at her side, easing her back against the pillows. "Easy there, Miss Reynolds. You're still mighty weak. Whatever sickness grabbed hold of you isn't letting go easy. But Silvercrest, they're expecting me. I'm to be their new schoolteacher." Panic rose in her chest. "I have to get there." Gabriel shook his head firmly. "You won't be going anywhere for at least a week, maybe longer. I've sent word to Silvercrest about your condition. They'll know you're alive but delayed." Tears of frustration welled in Cassandra's eyes. "I don't understand. How did this happen? I was fine until 2 days ago." "Desert fever, most likely," Gabriel explained. "Hits hard and fast, especially for folks not used to this territory. You need rest, good food, and time." He hesitated, then asked, "Is there anyone who should be notified? Family back east, perhaps?" Cassandra shook her head slowly. "No. My parents passed away last year. It's why I decided to come west for a fresh start." Gabriel nodded, understanding in his eyes. "Well, you'll get that fresh start, Miss Reynolds. Just not as quick as you planned." "Please call me Cassandra," she said, finding comfort in his calm presence. "And this town redemption, you said, what's left of it? What happened here?" A shadow passed over Gabriel's face. "Silver mine dried up 4 years ago. Most folks moved on to the next boomtown. Only about a dozen of us stayed." He gestured vaguely toward the window. "Some couldn't afford to leave. Others just couldn't bring themselves to abandon the place." "And which are you?" Cassandra asked, curiosity momentarily overriding her discomfort. Gabriel's lips curved into a hint of a smile. "Neither, I suppose. I own the land east of town, started a modest cattle operation. Don't need the town to survive, but I like having it nearby." Cassandra studied him, noting the calluses on his hands and the sun-browned skin of his face. He wasn't wearing the typical cowboy attire she'd imagined from dime novels, no flashy vest or dramatic hat. Instead, he wore a simple buttoned shirt with the sleeves rolled up and dark trousers held up by suspenders. Practical clothes for a working man. "I'm grateful you found me, Mr. Reid," she said softly. "Gabe," he corrected. "And I'm just glad I was coming into town when I did. Don't get many visitors these days." A fit of coughing seized Cassandra, and Gabriel quickly poured more water, supporting her head as she drank. "I think that's enough talking for now," he said. "You need rest. Mrs. Johnson will be by later with some broth. I'll check on you again this evening." As he turned to leave, Cassandra reached out weakly, her fingers brushing his arm. "Wait, where are you going?" Gabriel looked down at her, his expression softening. "Got cattle that need tending. Don't worry. This is my home, I'll be back. You're safe here." After he left, Cassandra sank back into the pillows, taking in her surroundings more carefully. The room was simple but clean, with a dresser, washstand, and bookshelf along one wall. Through the window, she could see the distant mountains, their peaks turned golden by the morning sun. Despite her illness and the disruption to her plans, a sense of peace settled over her as she drifted back to sleep. True to his word, Gabriel returned that evening after Mrs. Johnson, a kind, plump woman with silver-streaked hair, had helped Cassandra eat some chicken broth and change into a fresh nightgown. Her fever had subsided somewhat, though she remained weak. "Mrs. Johnson says you kept your broth down," Gabriel remarked as he entered, carrying a small bundle. "That's a good sign." Cassandra managed a weak smile. "She's very kind, though she seemed surprised that you'd taken me in." Gabriel's expression was unreadable as he set the bundle down on the dresser. "Mrs. Johnson likes to gossip. Don't mind her. She mentioned you haven't had visitors since your wife." Cassandra stopped abruptly, seeing the pain that flashed across Gabriel's face. "Rebecca passed 3 years ago," he said quietly. "Childbirth. Lost them both." "I'm so sorry," Cassandra whispered, mortified that she'd broached such a painful subject. Gabriel nodded, his jaw tight. "It's why I keep to myself mostly. Anyway," he continued, clearly changing the subject, "I brought some of your things from your satchel. Thought you might want them." Grateful for the diversion, Cassandra indicated he should bring them to her. Inside the bundle were her hairbrush, a small mirror, her journal, and a worn copy of Pride and Prejudice. "My favorite," she said, running her fingers over the book's cover. "Thank you." Gabriel glanced at the title. "Never read it myself. More familiar with practical manuals and the occasional newspaper." "Perhaps I could read some to you sometime," Cassandra offered, then immediately felt foolish. "That is, to repay your kindness somewhat." To her surprise, a genuine smile crossed Gabriel's face, transforming his features. "I'd like that, Miss Reynolds. Been a while since I heard a good story." The days that followed fell into a rhythm. Each morning, Gabriel would check on Cassandra before heading out to his ranch. Mrs. Johnson would visit midday, bringing food and helping with practical matters. In the evenings, Gabriel would return, sometimes bringing small gifts: wildflowers from the prairie, a piece of polished quartz from the abandoned mine, or once, a perfectly ripe peach that must have cost him dearly to acquire in this remote place. As Cassandra's strength gradually returned, she began to sit up for longer periods, even moving to a chair by the window where she could watch the few remaining residents of Redemption go about their business. Gabriel had explained that besides Mrs. Johnson, the town's inhabitants included Mr. Peterson, who ran the general store, Dr. Miller, who served the surrounding areas, the Hendersons, who operated what remained of the saloon, and a handful of others who had chosen to stay when the mine closed. On her 6th day in Redemption, Cassandra was feeling well enough to attempt walking around the room. Gabriel found her doing exactly this when he returned earlier than usual. "Should you be up?" he asked, concern evident in his voice as he hurried to her side. Cassandra smiled, pleased with her progress. "Dr. Miller visited this morning. He says I'm improving rapidly and that some gentle activity would be beneficial." Gabriel's shoulders relaxed. "Good. That's good news." He hesitated, then added, "I've heard back from Silvercrest. They're sending a replacement teacher temporarily, but the position will still be yours when you're well enough to travel." Mixed emotions washed over Cassandra: relief that her position was secure, but also a strange reluctance at the thought of leaving Redemption. Or perhaps, she admitted to herself, reluctance at leaving Gabriel's care. "Thank you for arranging that," she said. "You've done so much for me, a complete stranger." Gabriel shrugged, looking somewhat uncomfortable with her gratitude. "It's what anyone would do." "No," Cassandra said firmly. "It isn't. You've shown me extraordinary kindness, Mr. Reid Gabe. I won't forget it." A faint color rose in his cheeks, visible even beneath his tan. "Well, since you're feeling better, I thought you might like to join me for supper downstairs tonight. Beats eating in bed." "I'd like that very much," Cassandra replied, suddenly aware of her appearance. "Though I'm afraid I have nothing suitable to wear." "Already thought of that," Gabriel said, gesturing to a package on the dresser that she hadn't noticed when he entered. "Mrs. Johnson helped me select it from the general store. It's not fancy, but it should fit well enough." After he left to prepare supper, Cassandra opened the package to find a simple but pretty dress of blue cotton. It was slightly large but not uncomfortably so, and the color brought out the blue of her eyes. She brushed her long chestnut hair until it shone, then pinned it up as best she could without her usual accessories. When she made her way carefully down the stairs, holding tightly to the railing, she found Gabriel waiting at the bottom. He had changed as well, wearing a clean white shirt and his hair neatly combed. He stared at her for a long moment before offering his arm. "You look lovely, Miss Reynolds," he said quietly. "Cassandra," she reminded him, taking his arm and feeling an unexpected flutter in her chest at the contact. The main floor of Gabriel's home was as simply furnished as the upstairs, but everything was clean and well maintained. He led her to a small dining area where the table was set with mismatched but clean dishware, a vase of wildflowers serving as a centerpiece. "It's not much," Gabriel said, seeming suddenly self-conscious. "Been a while since I entertained." "It's perfect," Cassandra assured him, touched by the effort he had made. Supper consisted of a hearty beef stew, fresh biscuits, and to Cassandra's surprise, a bottle of wine. "Saved it for a special occasion," Gabriel explained as he poured her a small glass. "Figured your recovery qualifies." As they ate, Cassandra found herself increasingly drawn to this quiet, thoughtful man. Unlike the gentleman she had known in Boston, Gabriel spoke plainly and honestly. He told her about his cattle ranch, his dreams of expanding it one day, and his life before redemption. "I came west after the war," he explained, his expression distant. "Fought for the Union. Didn't have much to go back to in Pennsylvania, so I just kept heading west. Worked as a trail hand, then a foreman. Saved every penny until I could buy my own land." "And that's when you met your wife?" Cassandra asked gently. Gabriel nodded, a sad smile crossing his face. "Rebecca was the schoolteacher here when the town was still thriving. Smart as a whip and kind to everyone. Never did understand what she saw in a rough cowhand like me." "I can imagine," Cassandra said without thinking, then blushed deeply when Gabriel looked at her questioningly. "I mean, you're a good man. That's clear from how you've treated me." Gabriel studied her for a moment, then changed the subject. "What about you? What brought a Boston lady out to Arizona territory alone?" Cassandra sipped her wine, gathering her thoughts. "After my parents died, influenza took them both within a week of each other. I found myself at a crossroads. I had been teaching at a small private school, but with no family left, Boston held too many painful memories." She sighed, remembering her decision to leave. "When I saw the advertisement for a teacher in Silvercrest, it seemed like fate. A new beginning in a place where the sun always shines." "It shines plenty," Gabriel agreed with a chuckle. "Sometimes more than a person wants." As the evening progressed, Cassandra found herself laughing more than she had in months. Gabriel, initially reserved, revealed a dry wit that surprised and delighted her. By the time he escorted her back upstairs, mindful of her still recovering strength, Cassandra felt a connection to him that both excited and frightened her. At her door, Gabriel hesitated. "I enjoyed this evening," he said, his voice lower than usual. "It's been a long time since this house heard laughter." "I enjoyed it too," Cassandra replied softly. "Thank you for everything." For a moment, neither moved. Cassandra found herself studying the fine lines around his eyes, the strong curve of his jaw, the way his gaze seemed to hold her in place. Then, as if catching himself, Gabriel stepped back. "You should rest," he said. "Good night, Cassandra." "Good night, Gabe," she replied, watching him turn and walk back down the hallway before closing her door. As Cassandra prepared for bed, she found herself humming softly, her heart lighter than it had been in months. She told herself it was simply the pleasure of feeling better, of having a pleasant evening after days of illness. But as she drifted off to sleep, Gabriel's face was the last image in her mind. The following days brought increasing strength and mobility. Dr. Miller declared her recovery remarkable but advised against travel for at least another week. Cassandra found herself secretly grateful for the extended stay, using the time to explore the small town of Redemption. Gabriel, when not tending to his ranch, served as her guide. He showed her the abandoned mine that had once been the town's lifeblood, the small church that now only held services when a traveling preacher passed through, and introduced her to the remaining residents, all of whom welcomed her warmly. "They like you," Gabriel remarked as they walked back from visiting the Hendersons at the saloon, where Cassandra had been coaxed into playing the out-of-tune piano. "Haven't seen old Henderson smile like that in years." "They're good people," Cassandra replied, enjoying the feel of the evening breeze on her face. "I can see why you stayed, even after." She trailed off, still hesitant to mention his loss directly. Gabriel nodded, understanding her unspoken words. "After Rebecca died, I thought about leaving. Too many memories. But this place gets under your skin after a while." He gestured to the mountains in the distance, painted purple by the setting sun. "There's a beauty to it that's hard to explain to folks who haven't lived here." "I can see it," Cassandra said softly. It's different from anything I knew in Boston, but there's something honest about it. Gabriel looked at her then, really looked at her, as if seeing something new. That's exactly it. Honest. The land doesn't pretend to be anything it's not. They walked in comfortable silence the rest of the way to Gabriel's house. As they approached, Cassandra noticed a rider coming from the opposite direction. Gabriel tensed beside her, his hand moving instinctively to his hip where she knew he carried a revolver beneath his jacket. "Stay behind me," he murmured, positioning himself between Cassandra and the approaching stranger. The rider slowed as he neared them, and Cassandra could make out a young man, perhaps in his early 20s, his clothes dusty from the trail. "Evening," Gabriel called out, his voice neutral but watchful. "Can I help you?" The young man pulled his horse to a stop. "Looking for redemption. This it?" His gaze moved past Gabriel to Cassandra, his expression curious. "What's your business here?" Gabriel asked, still guarded. "Name's Charlie Weber. I'm looking for Cassandra Reynolds," the young man replied. "Town council in Silvercrest sent me to check on her condition and escort her back when she's able." Cassandra stepped forward. "I'm Cassandra Reynolds." Charlie tipped his hat. "Madam, town's been worried about you. School's set to start in 2 weeks, and the temporary teacher can only stay through the end of the month." Gabriel's posture had relaxed somewhat, but Cassandra noticed his jaw was tight. "Miss Reynolds is still recovering," he said firmly. "Dr. Miller advised against travel for at least another week." Charlie shrugged. "I can wait. Got nowhere pressing to be." "You can take a room at the Hendersons," Gabriel said, his tone making it clear this wasn't a suggestion. "Tell them I sent you." After Charlie had ridden off toward the saloon, Cassandra turned to Gabriel. "You didn't need to be so abrupt with him." Gabriel's expression was unreadable. "Don't know him. Can't be too careful out here." "He was sent by Silvercrest," Cassandra pointed out. "To help me. To take you away," Gabriel muttered, then looked immediately regretful. "I'm sorry. That wasn't fair. Of course you need to go to Silvercrest. It's why you came west." Cassandra felt a tightness in her chest that had nothing to do with her recent illness. "Yes," she agreed quietly. "It is." The arrival of Charlie Weber changed the atmosphere between them. Gabriel became more reserved, spending longer hours at his ranch. When they were together, their easy conversations were replaced by awkward silences and polite small talk. Cassandra found herself missing the connection they had been building, yet unsure how to bridge the sudden distance. A week after Charlie's arrival, Dr. Miller pronounced Cassandra fit for travel. "You're fully recovered, Miss Reynolds," he declared after examining her. "The journey to Silvercrest shouldn't pose any risk to your health now." Though she had been expecting this verdict, the news hit Cassandra harder than anticipated. She thanked the doctor and paid his modest fee, then sat alone in her room, Gabriel's guest room. She reminded herself contemplating her imminent departure. That evening, Charlie approached her as she sat on the small porch of Gabriel's house, watching the sunset. "Doc says you're good to travel," he said, leaning against the porch railing. "Thought we might head out day after tomorrow, if that suits you." Cassandra nodded, unable to summon much enthusiasm. "That would be fine. Thank you for waiting so patiently." Charlie studied her for a moment. "You know, everyone in Silvercrest is real excited to meet you. The children especially. Previous teacher was strict. As they come, the little ones are hoping for someone with a gentler touch." "I look forward to meeting them," Cassandra said, trying to recapture her earlier excitement about the position. "It's a nice town," Charlie continued. "Newer than this place. Got a proper church, nice houses. My family runs the mercantile there. You'll want for nothing." Cassandra smiled politely, but her thoughts were elsewhere. Where was Gabriel? He had left before dawn and hadn't returned for supper. Would he even be back to say goodbye before she left? As if summoned by her thoughts, she spotted a rider approaching in the gathering dusk. Even at a distance, she recognized Gabriel's straight posture and the distinctive gait of his horse. Charlie followed her gaze. "Reid's been good to you," he remarked. "Folks in Silvercrest were surprised when we got word you were being cared for here. This town doesn't exactly have a reputation for hospitality these days." "Mr. Reid saved my life," Cassandra said firmly. "I owe him everything." Charlie raised his eyebrows but said nothing more as Gabriel dismounted and approached the porch. His expression was guarded as he nodded to Charlie, then turned to Cassandra. "Dr. Miller found me at the ranch," he said. "Told me the news. You must be pleased to be well enough to continue your journey." Before Cassandra could respond, Charlie interjected. "We'll be heading out day after tomorrow, Reid. I'll have her in Silvercrest by nightfall." Gabriel's jaw tightened, but he nodded. "Good. Safe travels to you both." With that, he turned and led his horse toward the small stable behind the house, leaving Cassandra staring after him in dismay. Charlie excused himself shortly after, saying he needed to make preparations for their departure. Alone on the porch, Cassandra felt tears prickling behind her eyes. Was this how it would end? With cold formality and unspoken words? Gathering her courage, she walked to the stable where she found Gabriel brushing down his horse with more vigor than necessary. "Is that all you have to say?" she asked from the doorway. "Safe travels." Gabriel didn't look up from his task. "What would you have me say, Cassandra?" "I don't know," she admitted, stepping into the stable. Something. Anything other than acting like the past 2 weeks meant nothing. His hands stilled, and he finally turned to face her. In the dim light of the stable lantern, his expression was a mixture of pain and resignation. "They meant something," he said quietly. "More than they should have, perhaps." Cassandra moved closer, her heart pounding. "What does that mean?" Gabriel ran a hand through his hair, a gesture she had come to recognize as a sign of his inner turmoil. "It means I forgot myself. Forgot that you were always meant to move on. That redemption was just a stopping point for you, not a destination." "It doesn't have to be that way," Cassandra said, the words tumbling out before she could consider them fully. Gabriel looked at her sharply. "What are you saying?" Cassandra took a deep breath, suddenly uncertain. "I'm saying that I've come to care for this place, for the people here." She paused, gathering her courage. "For you." The silence that followed seemed to stretch for an eternity. Gabriel's expression cycled through surprise, hope, and then something that looked painfully like fear. "You have a position waiting in Silvercrest," he finally said. "A new life all planned out." "Plans can change," Cassandra countered. "Redemption needs a teacher too. The children here have to ride miles to the next town for schooling." Gabriel shook his head. "There aren't enough families left to support a school. And what would you live on? This town has nothing to offer someone like you, Cassandra." "It has you," she said simply. Gabriel closed his eyes briefly, as if her words had caused him physical pain. When he opened them again, his gaze was resolute. "I can't let you throw away your future on a dying town and a broken-down cowboy. You deserve better." "Shouldn't that be my decision?" Cassandra asked, frustration rising. "Sometimes we need others to save us from ourselves," Gabriel replied, his voice gentle but firm. "You nearly died coming out here, Cassandra. You've been through a traumatic experience, and it's natural to form attachments to those who help us through such times. But those feelings aren't always real." His words stung, all the more because a small part of her wondered if he might be right. Was what she felt for Gabriel genuine, or merely gratitude mixed with the romance of her situation? "So you've decided for both of us," she said, Unable to keep the hurt from her voice, Gabriel stepped forward, closing the distance between them. For a moment, she thought he might take her in his arms. Instead, he took her hand in both of his touch gentle. "Go to Silvercrest," he said softly. "Start the life you came west for. If after a few months you still feel the same way, well, redemption isn't going anywhere. Neither am I." Cassandra wanted to argue, to insist that she knew her own heart. But the reasonable part of her recognized the wisdom in his words. She had known Gabriel Reid for barely 2 weeks. Was that enough time to change the course of her life? "Promise me something," she said, holding his gaze. "Promise you'll come to Silvercrest. Visit me. Don't just let this end here." A ghost of a smile touched Gabriel's lips. "I promise." The next day passed in a blur of preparations. Cassandra packed her few belongings, said goodbye to Mrs. Johnson and the other residents who had become friends, and tried not to think about leaving Gabriel. He remained polite but distant, helping with arrangements while carefully avoiding being alone with her. On her final evening in redemption, Cassandra sat at the small desk in her room, writing in her journal. A knock at the door interrupted her thoughts. "Come in," she called, expecting Mrs. Johnson, who had promised to bring a traveling basket of food for her journey. Instead, Gabriel entered, carrying a small wooden box. "I wanted to give you this," he said, placing it on the desk beside her journal. "A parting gift." Curious, Cassandra opened the box to find a delicate silver pendant on a chain. The pendant was shaped like a small book, and when she opened it, she found it was actually a locket, empty and waiting for a memento. "Gabriel, it's beautiful," she breathed, touching the fine craftsmanship with her fingertip. "It was my mother's," he explained. "She always said books hold our stories, both the ones we read and the ones we live." Seemed fitting for a teacher. Overcome with emotion, Cassandra stood and impulsively embraced him. After a moment's hesitation, his arms came around her, holding her close. She breathed in his scent, leather and sage, and something uniquely him, trying to memorize it. "Thank you," she whispered against his chest. "I'll treasure it always." Gabriel's hand came up to stroke her hair once, gently, before he pulled away. "I should let you finish your packing," he said, his voice rough with emotion. "You have an early start tomorrow." As he turned to leave, Cassandra called after him, "I'll hold you to your promise, Gabriel Reid." He paused at the door, looking back at her with an expression that made her heart ache. "Good night, Cassandra Reynolds." The next morning dawned clear and bright, as if the weather itself was encouraging her journey. Charlie had the horses ready, Cassandra's belongings secured to a gentle mare he had brought specifically for her. Gabriel stood on the porch, watching the preparations with a carefully neutral expression. When it was time to depart, Cassandra approached him one last time. "Thank you for saving my life," she said formally, aware of Charlie's presence nearby. Gabriel tipped his hat. "Safe journey, Miss Reynolds. I hope Silvercrest is everything you've hoped for." Cassandra touched the locket now hanging around her neck. "I'll write to you," she promised. "Let you know how I'm settling in." A small, genuine smile finally broke through his reserve. "I'd like that." With one last look at the man who had come to mean so much to her in such a short time, Cassandra mounted her horse and followed Charlie out of redemption. As they crested the small rise at the edge of town, she turned back for a final glimpse. Gabriel still stood on the porch, a solitary figure watching her departure. The journey to Silvercrest was uneventful, taking most of the day as they traversed the rugged landscape. Charlie proved to be a pleasant travel companion, sharing stories about the town and its inhabitants. By the time they arrived, the sun was setting, casting a golden glow over a bustling settlement that stood in stark contrast to the quiet ghost town she had left behind. Silvercrest boasted a main street lined with businesses, a proper church with a white steeple, and neat rows of houses spreading outward. Cassandra could see why it had seemed so promising from the advertisements. It was everything Redemption was not, vibrant and growing. The town council had arranged temporary lodgings for her in the home of the mayor and his wife, who welcomed her warmly. The following days were a whirlwind of introductions, tours of the schoolhouse, and preparations for classes to begin. Cassandra threw herself into her work, determined to make a success of the opportunity she had been given. Yet each night, as she retired to her room, her thoughts inevitably turned to Gabriel. She kept her promise, writing long letters describing her new life and the challenges and joys of teaching the 30-some children now in her care. His replies came infrequently and were briefer than hers, but she treasured each one, reading them until the paper grew soft from handling. As weeks turned into months, Cassandra established herself in Silvercrest. She was well liked by the townspeople and adored by her pupils. She made friends among the other young women in town and was invited to social gatherings where eligible bachelors were inevitably present. Yet she found herself comparing each man she met to a certain green-eyed cowboy, and all fell short. Winter came to Arizona territory, bringing cooler temperatures but little snow. Christmas approached, and with it, a 2-week break from school. Cassandra had been in Silvercrest for nearly 4 months, and though she had grown fond of the town and its people, a persistent ache remained in her heart. Gabriel had not visited as promised. His letters spoke of a harsh autumn, cattle that needed tending, 1,000 practical reasons why he couldn't leave his ranch. Cassandra began to wonder if he had offered the promise merely to ease their parting, never intending to keep it. The Sunday before Christmas, Cassandra attended services at the church, joining in the familiar hymns with less enthusiasm than usual. As the congregation filed out afterward, Mayor Wallace approached her. "Miss Reynolds, I hope you'll join us for Christmas dinner," he said, his wife nodding beside him. No one should be alone for the holiday. Cassandra smiled, touched by their kindness. "Thank you, but I've made other plans." It wasn't until the words left her mouth that she realized she had made a decision that had been brewing for weeks. The Wallaces looked surprised but didn't press for details. The following morning, Cassandra visited Charlie Weber at his family's mercantile. "I need to hire a horse," she explained, "and perhaps some guidance on the trail to redemption." Charlie's eyebrows shot up. "You're going back there? Now? It's a full day's ride, and the weather's unpredictable this time of year." "I'm aware of the risks," Cassandra said firmly, "but it's important." Charlie studied her for a long moment, then sighed. "Reid hasn't visited, has he?" Cassandra shook her head. "No, and I need to know why." "I could take you," Charlie offered. "Wouldn't feel right letting you make that ride alone." "I appreciate that, but this is something I need to do myself," Cassandra replied. "Just point me in the right direction and make sure I have a reliable horse." Reluctantly, Charlie agreed, helping her prepare for the journey and providing a detailed map. "If you're not back in 3 days, I'm coming after you," he warned as she mounted the sturdy mare he had selected for her. "I'll be back," Cassandra assured him, though she wasn't entirely certain what she would find in Redemption or what decisions she might make once there. The ride was longer and more arduous than she remembered, but Cassandra pressed on, determined to reach Redemption before nightfall. The landscape was beautiful in its stark winter barrenness, and she found herself watching for familiar landmarks as she drew closer to the town that had briefly been her home. The sun was low on the horizon when she finally crested the rise overlooking Redemption. The town looked much as she remembered it, though smoke rose from more chimneys than before, suggesting perhaps not everyone had been home during her previous stay. Her heart pounding, Cassandra rode directly to Gabriel's house. No smoke rose from its chimney, and no light shone from the windows. Disappointment flooded her as she dismounted, wondering if he might be at his ranch outside of town. "He ain't there," came a voice from behind her. She turned to find Mrs. Johnson approaching, bundled against the winter chill. "Been gone 3 days now." "Gone? Where?" Cassandra asked, a knot forming in her stomach. Mrs. Johnson's weathered face creased in a knowing smile. "Silvercrest. Left as soon as school let out for Christmas break. Said he had a promise to keep." Cassandra stared at the older woman in disbelief. "We must have passed each other on the trail." "Likely so," Mrs. Johnson agreed. "He's been planning it for weeks. Even bought a new shirt from Peterson's store." The thought of Gabriel traveling to see her while she was journeying to find him might have been comical if it weren't so frustrating. "I have to go back," Cassandra said, already turning toward her horse. Mrs. Johnson's hand on her arm stopped her. "Not tonight, child. It'll be dark soon, and the temperature's dropping. Stay the night, start fresh in the morning." Recognizing the wisdom in the older woman's words, Cassandra reluctantly agreed. Mrs. Johnson insisted she stay at her home, providing a hot meal and a comfortable bed. Despite her exhaustion from the day's ride, Cassandra found sleep elusive, her mind racing with thoughts of Gabriel arriving in Silvercrest only to find her gone. She set out at first light the next morning, pushing her horse as fast as was safe on the winter trail. The day was clear but cold, the sun providing little warmth as she retraced her route from the previous day. By mid-afternoon, she was beginning to recognize landmarks that indicated she was nearing Silvercrest. As she rounded a bend in the trail, Cassandra spotted a rider approaching from the opposite direction. Even at a distance, she would know that straight-backed posture anywhere. Her heart leaped in her chest as she urged her horse forward. Gabriel saw her at the same moment, his own mount quickening its pace. They met in the middle of the trail, both breathless and flushed from the cold and the sudden joy of their encounter. "Cassandra," Gabriel breathed, dismounting in one fluid motion and striding toward her. "What are you doing out here?" She slid from her saddle, nearly stumbling in her haste. "Looking for you. Mrs. Johnson told me you'd gone to Silvercrest. I promised I would visit," he said, his eyes drinking in the sight of her as if he couldn't quite believe she was real. "When I arrived yesterday and found you gone, Charlie told me you'd headed for redemption. I've been half crazy with worry." They stood facing each other on the lonely trail, the winter sun casting long shadows across the ground. Cassandra's carefully prepared speech fled from her mind, leaving only the raw truth. "I couldn't wait any longer," she admitted. "I had to know if what I felt, what I still feel, was real." Gabriel's expression softened, the guardedness that had characterized their parting nowhere to be seen. "And what do you feel, Cassandra Reynolds?" "Love," she said simply. "I love you, Gabriel Reid. These months apart have only confirmed what I knew in my heart the day I left redemption." For a long moment, Gabriel said nothing, and Cassandra feared she had misread everything. Then, with a movement so swift it startled her, he closed the distance between them, gathering her in his arms. "I've loved you since the moment you opened your eyes in my home," he confessed, his voice rough with emotion. "But I convinced myself it was selfish to keep you in redemption when you had such promise elsewhere." "And now?" Cassandra asked, her hands coming up to frame his face, noting the new lines of strain around his eyes. "Now I'm done being noble," Gabriel said with a half-smile. "These have been the longest months of my life. I want you with me, if that's what you want too." In answer, Cassandra rose on her tiptoes and pressed her lips to his. The kiss was tentative at first, then deepened as Gabriel's arms tightened around her. When they finally broke apart, both were breathing hard, their breath forming small clouds in the cold air. "I take it that's a yes," Gabriel murmured, his forehead resting against hers. Cassandra laughed, happiness bubbling up inside her. It's a yes, but there are practicalities to consider. My position in Silvercrest. Actually, Gabriel interrupted. That's part of why I was coming to see you. Redemption is growing again. Cassandra pulled back slightly to look at him in surprise. Growing? How? New silver vein was discovered about 10 miles from the old mine, Gabriel explained. It's not as rich as the original strike, but it's drawing people back. 3 families moved in last month, with more coming after the new year. His eyes held a glint of excitement she hadn't seen before. Town councils reformed. First item of business was establishing a proper school. They need a teacher. Are you offering me a job, Mr. Reid? Cassandra asked, her heart light with joy. I'm offering you a life, Gabriel replied seriously. With me. It won't always be easy. Redemption's still rough around the edges, and ranching has its ups and downs. But if you're willing, I'm willing, Cassandra interrupted. More than willing. But I can't simply abandon my pupils in the middle of the school year. I need to give proper notice, help find a replacement. Gabriel nodded, understanding in his eyes. Of course, I wouldn't expect anything less from you. The school in Redemption won't be ready until spring anyway. He brushed a strand of hair from her face. I can wait a few more months, now that I know you'll be coming home. Home. The word resonated in Cassandra's heart. She had traveled west seeking a new beginning, never imagining she would find it in a ghost town with a man who had saved more than just her life. We should get to shelter before dark, Gabriel said, glancing at the lowering sun. Silvercrest. Cassandra nodded, suddenly eager to share their news. The Wallaces invited me for Christmas dinner. I'm sure they wouldn't mind one more guest. They mounted their horses and rode side by side toward Silvercrest, their hands occasionally reaching across the space between them, as if to reassure themselves that the other was really there. The following months passed in a flurry of preparations and farewells. Cassandra fulfilled her commitment to Silvercrest, teaching until the end of the school year while helping to train her replacement, a young woman from California who arrived in March. On weekends, Gabriel would ride to Silvercrest, sometimes staying at the hotel, other times returning to his ranch the same day. Each visit strengthened their bond, confirming for both that their decision was right. In Redemption, changes were underway. The school building was being renovated, new families were arriving weekly, and the general store had expanded its inventory. Mrs. Johnson had taken it upon herself to spread the news of the schoolteacher who had fallen ill in their ghost town only to return to marry the cowboy who had nursed her back to health. We're not married yet, Cassandra had protested when she heard the gossip during one of her visits to help prepare the schoolhouse. Mrs. Johnson had merely smiled knowingly. Details, child. Mere details. On a bright May morning, with the desert blooming around them, Cassandra packed the last of her belongings into the wagon Gabriel had brought to transport her to Redemption. The people of Silvercrest gathered to bid her farewell, many of her students presenting handmade cards and small gifts. You've done a fine job here, Miss Reynolds, Mayor Wallace said, shaking her hand. Redemption's lucky to have you. Thank you for giving me my start, Cassandra replied sincerely. I'll never forget my time here. As Gabriel helped her into the wagon, Charlie Weber approached, a wrapped package in his hands. Wedding present, he explained with a grin. Little early, but figured you might need it right away. Cassandra thanked him warmly. She had come to consider Charlie a good friend over the months, and he had been among the first to congratulate her when she and Gabriel announced their engagement. The journey to Redemption was filled with happy conversation as Gabriel pointed out improvements to his ranch as they passed it, and spoke of plans for expanding the cattle operation. Cassandra shared her ideas for the school, her excitement growing as they approached the town that would now truly be her home. As they crested the familiar rise overlooking Redemption, Cassandra gasped in surprise. The main street had been decorated with bunting and flowers, and it seemed the entire population, now nearly triple what it had been during her illness, had gathered to welcome them. "What's all this?" she asked, turning to Gabriel in confusion. A smile played at the corners of his mouth. "Seems Mrs. Johnson's been busy. Word got out we were arriving today." As they drove down the main street, people cheered and called out greetings. Children ran alongside the wagon, and women waved from the boardwalks. It was a far cry from the ghost town Cassandra had stumbled into less than a year ago. Gabriel guided the wagon to a stop in front of his house, their house now, where Mrs. Johnson waited on the porch, beaming with satisfaction. As he helped Cassandra down, the older woman bustled forward. "Welcome home, dear," she said, embracing Cassandra warmly. "Everything's ready." "Ready for what?" Cassandra asked, looking between Mrs. Johnson and Gabriel, who now wore an expression that was both nervous and hopeful. "For our wedding," Gabriel said quietly, taking her hands in his. "If you're willing, that is. The minister's here from Silver City, and everyone's gathered. But if you'd rather wait, have more time to prepare." Cassandra's heart swelled with love for this man who continually surprised her. "You planned all this?" "Mrs. Johnson helped," Gabriel admitted. "Said it was high time we made things official, what with you moving in and all. But only if you want to. We can wait if." Cassandra silenced him with a kiss, heedless of the onlookers who cheered approvingly. "Yes," she said when they parted. "Yes, I want to marry you today, Gabriel Reid." Relief and joy transformed his features. "I was hoping you'd say that. There's a dress inside. Mrs. Johnson insisted on it." The next hour passed in a blur as Mrs. Johnson and several other women helped Cassandra change into a simple but beautiful white dress that fit her perfectly. Her hair was arranged with wildflowers, and Mrs. Johnson fastened the book locket around her neck. "Something old," she declared. The ceremony took place in front of the newly renovated schoolhouse, with the entire town in attendance. As Cassandra walked toward Gabriel, who waited with the minister under an arch of desert flowers, she marveled at the journey that had brought her here. From a feverish collapse in a ghost town to becoming its schoolteacher and the wife of the man who had saved her life, it was more wondrous than anything she could have imagined when she left Boston. Gabriel's eyes never left hers as she approached, his expression one of such profound love and happiness that it brought tears to her eyes. When she reached him, he took her hands in his touch steady and reassuring as always. The minister's words were traditional but heartfelt, speaking of love that overcomes obstacles and flourishes even in the harshest environments. When it came time for their vows, Gabriel spoke clearly, his voice carrying to the assembled crowd. "I, Gabriel James Reid, take you, Cassandra Elizabeth Reynolds, to be my lawfully wedded wife. I promise to love and cherish you, to protect and provide for you, and to be faithful to you alone for all the days of my life." You brought life back to a dying town and to a man who had forgotten how to hope. Whatever challenges come our way, we'll face them together. Cassandra blinked back tears as she repeated her own vows, adding, "You saved me in more ways than you know, Gabriel. You showed me what it means to be truly home. I promise to stand by your side through whatever life brings, to love you faithfully, and to never take for granted the miracle that brought us together." As the minister pronounced them husband and wife, Gabriel drew her into his arms for a kiss that sealed their promises and was met with enthusiastic applause from the townspeople. The celebration that followed lasted well into the night, with music, dancing, and more food than Cassandra had ever seen in one place. As the festivities continued around them, Gabriel led Cassandra away from the crowd, toward the edge of town where they could see the stars spreading across the vast desert sky. "Happy?" he asked, his arm around her waist. "More than I ever thought possible," Cassandra replied, leaning into his embrace. It's strange to think that if I hadn't fallen ill, if you hadn't found me. Some things are meant to be, Gabriel said, pressing a kiss to her temple. Though I'd prefer you avoid near-death experiences in the future. Cassandra laughed, turning in his arms to face him. I plan to stay perfectly healthy for a very long time, Mr. Reid. We have a school to build, a ranch to expand, and perhaps someday, a family to raise. Gabriel's expression softened at her words. A family, he repeated. I'd like that. Very much. So would I, Cassandra said softly. But for now, I'm content with just us. And this town that's becoming something new because of people who refuse to let it die. Like us, Gabriel murmured, drawing her closer. Like us? Cassandra agreed, rising on her tiptoes to kiss him again, sealing their future together under the endless Arizona sky. In the years that followed, Redemption continued to grow and thrive. The school flourished under Cassandra's guidance, eventually requiring a second teacher as more families arrived. Gabriel's cattle operation expanded, providing employment for many of the town's men. And in their third year of marriage, they welcomed twins, a boy and a girl who grew up knowing the story of how their mother had stumbled into a ghost town and their father had nursed her back to health, discovering a love worth fighting for. On the 10th anniversary of Cassandra's arrival in Redemption, the town held a celebration in the now bustling Main Street. As she stood beside Gabriel, watching their children play with the dozens of others now calling the town home, Cassandra fingered the book locket still hanging around her neck. What are you thinking? Gabriel asked, noticing her contemplative expression. Cassandra smiled up at him, the love in her heart as strong as it had been on their wedding day. I'm thinking that sometimes being lost is the only way to be found. And that the best stories are the ones we live, not just the ones we read. Gabriel's arm tightened around her waist as he bent to kiss her, both of them oblivious to the knowing smiles of the townspeople around them. In a place once given up for dead, life and love had found a way to flourish just like the desert blooms that emerged after rain, proving that even in the harshest conditions, beauty and renewal were always possible.